Hello, and welcome to the 12th House Podcast. I'm Michelle Pelzon, your co-host and the head witch in charge here at Holisticism.
Hello, and I'm Wallace, your other co-host. Welcome to the pod. We have such a good episode today. We have at Crypto Witch Club on Instagram on the pod talking about crypto. You asked, we delivered.
Oh boy, did you ask. Many requests for this episode, and we'll probably have a lot more content on cryptocurrency and what we talked about today, but this is a really great place to start. And if you're not already following Crypto Witch Club on Instagram, do it. What are you doing, my guy? Go follow, because their content is so good. I described it in this conversation as the Elle Woods of crypto. And I feel like that is, just like warm, bubbly, fun, likes pink, has a good time, is also super smart. Like what? Like
approachable?
Yeah.
But will own you. Does know their shit. Yeah. Can back it up.
Exactly. And if you are a brand new baby crypto witch, welcome. This is a safe place. And we're really quickly just going to breeze over some elements and words that you might not be familiar with. And these are not complete and total definitions. Strong recommend that you go do a little bit of research on your own and do a Google and just get involved, start to learn on your own, because you'll get a more sort of blown out idea and a more 360 idea of what all these words mean, but will orient you in space because it can be very disorienting. So Bitcoin is, we talk about it a little bit in this episode, but it's like the OG of cryptocurrencies. So every coin or token is a type of cryptocurrency, essentially. And Bitcoin is kind of the catch-all term. Some people use it interchangeably for cryptocurrency, but Bitcoin in and of itself is its own coin. So it's like Ethereum is its own coin. Bitcoin is its own coin.
Yes.
Okay. Altcoin. Wallace, do you know the definition of altcoin?
Altcoin is everything that is not Bitcoin and not Ethereum.
There you go.
Wait.
Period. Well, no, just not Bitcoin.
Just not Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Wow.
Ethereum is technically an altcoin. Yeah.
True that.
What about an exchange? Does this feel like a quiz?
No, but like an exchange, in general.
Yeah.
Like a stock exchange. Well, so for example,
exchange.
There's the stock exchange and then there's cryptocurrency exchange, which are two different things. The crypto world is still actually unregulated, and there's hot debate among the communities about who is going to regulate that and how and when. So stay tuned. That shall be an interesting historical development in the world of Web3. But an exchange is where you can buy, sell, stake, and mint. What else am I missing?
Nice.
Your crypto. What else can you do?
On an exchange?
Yeah.
I mean, it depends on the exchange, but some good examples would be like Coinbase, Gemini, Voyager. Yeah. So you can check those out.
And different coins are available on different exchanges, so it's not all universal now. So you just want to know, if you're looking for a specific coin, just check out what exchange it's available on, because it's not all the same.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Okay, what about a wallet?
Okay, if you think about a real wallet, which who has those anymore? I don't. I basically just have a little thing that carries plastic cards.
Me too.
Yeah. It's actually my case for my studs earrings.
Oh my gosh, wait, the neon one?
Yeah.
I just got some studs and I was like, this is really cute. I'm keeping this. You're coming home with me.
That is currently my wallet.
Oh, tight. My wallet is a coin purse. And that's it.
There you go.
That's all you need. Purse. Yeah.
I've gotten a lot of compliments on that little neon case. Nice. People are like, cool wallet, man. I'm like, not really. Anyways, I digress. Think about, if you were going to take out cash to, say, buy some fruit at your local fruit stand and you needed some cash, you have to take cash out of your bank because you can't purchase said fruit with a card. When you have crypto, and you're bringing it into a digital wallet, it's kind of a similar thing where you're taking the crypto out of the exchange and you now have it in your, I was going to say on your person, on your digital person.
Yeah.
It's in your digital wallet. You own it. No one can take it from you. It's completely safe. And it's a really great way to store your crypto to ensure, like, you know, similar to I guess, avoid volatility. What's another way of saying that?
Well, technically you haven't really invested in crypto, and you haven't really invested in the decentralization, like DeFi, until you've taken your cryptocurrency that you've bought off of an exchange. So if the exchange is still holding it basically for you, then the whole point of cryptocurrency is that there's no middleman who owns your assets, who holds your assets for you. You hold your assets. So you have your money metaphorically underneath your bed, right? But not. And so if you don't move your coins off of an exchange into a wallet, they're technically not really yours, right? You don't own them because you haven't completed that final step of the transaction. You metaphorically own them. You've paid for them. They're going to show up in your account, but they're not in your wallet, and you can't use them until they're in your wallet. You can't use them for a transaction.
Yes, exactly. That's the most important part.
Yeah,
that's
the whole point of decentralized finance, is that you own no middleman owns your assets. You have direct access. There's no one who can sort of block you from getting what you need, what you've paid for. And so that's an important step if you believe in that system, which a lot of us do. Great. Okay. Let's talk about proof of work versus proof of stake.
Oh yeah, we talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So these are two different ways to basically mine a coin. Proof of work is a system where the mining is done by those who have money and time and energy. So it takes it is not energy efficient. It takes a lot of energy. Bitcoin's a good example.
Computer farms exist for people to mine and essentially do the equations, the mathematical equations, if you will, that take to create a Bitcoin and to mine it.
Exactly. To effectively sort of find it, right? Using the math. And then proof of stake or a proof of stake system is where mining is done by those who hold the coins. So different coins use different systems. And you can look at that when you go and you read more info on the coins. They'll either say proof of work or proof of stake or POW or POS. So if you care more about being more energy efficient, then look for coins that are proof of stake. Okay, well, so it's an NFT.
An NFT is a non-fungible token. So in this realm, there are fungible tokens and non-fungible tokens. And a fungible token would be Bitcoin and any cryptocurrency. A non-fungible token is something that you own and you own the rights to, but you can't exchange it for another currency. You can sell it, but you cannot exchange it to receive value from it. I guess except if you sell it. That's not explaining it very well.
No, but non-fungible token, and we see this a lot right now in art, and we talk about it in an episode. Okay. A stable coin is when you first get started, people will say invest in stable coin. Those are coins that just have low volatility. One of the biggest complaints about crypto is that it's extremely volatile, because it is. And it's not recommended if you're not going to be day trading crypto to invest in things that are extremely volatile, because the point for many of us who are getting involved is to really hold, or the acronym that they use on the internet is HODL, HODL, which is just a misspelling of hold. But basically, you want to hold on to your crypto. It's an investment that's going to get more and more value over time. So you don't want to be day trading. It takes a lot of energy and time. I mean, maybe you want to, but most of us are probably not going to be doing that because we just don't have the bandwidth to do it, which is why you might want to invest in a stable coin, because it's a little less volatile than typical crypto.
Yeah. And a good distinction between the two is a stable coin is always backed by something that is, outside of or separated from the asset. So it's like gold or USD is what stabilizes the coin because it's backed by another currency. And that's essentially what makes it attractive as a way to start. But that is also essentially backed by the monetary system that we're used to now, which is the fiat system, versus crypto, which is decentralized. So that's another way to think about how things are backed and validated.
And another way that you're going to, Shirin talks about it in this episode, but another way that you can sort of research the validity of a coin or a token or whether you want to invest in it is by looking at the market cap. And the market cap is just the total value held within the cryptocurrency. So if there's a higher market cap, then that means that it's probably, a little bit more stable, a little bit more legit if you're an anxious buyer.
Well said.
Smart contracts are equivalent to legal contracts between two parties in the digital world, but they're different than a legal contract. And smart contracts let you exchange property, money, shares, or anything valuable securely and transparently without a go-between. And there are really incredible smart contracts being written and used for NFTs right now in the space, but there are so many other use cases that we could use smart contracts for, which is a really cool technological development.
Mm-hmm. Perfect.
Okay. And then what's the difference between a coin and a token?
I feel like I'm not really good at explaining this because a coin, like I know how to explain a coin. Say your definition.
Well, for me, the way that I understand it is a coin has its own blockchain and a token is sort of drafting off another bigger blockchain. So like there are tokens that are made on the Ethereum blockchain.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And like Rally Coin are tokens because they're not coins because they're on the Ethereum blockchain.
Yeah. So it's like they're acting on the blockchain that is already established.
Exactly. And that can either give them legitimacy or not. But if something's on the Ethereum blockchain, that's like going to be generally good.
Yeah, man. Ethereum's the new top dog.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All-time highs. And ATH means all-time high, which means highest that those coins or tokens have ever been valued at. And Bitcoin and Ethereum just had their all-time highs this week, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's pretty fun. No all-time.
It's pretty fun.
No all-time lows happening.
Okay, cool. So that's our brief glossary of terms, super dumbed down. There's definitely a lot more that you could read about all of those terms, but that should give you a good jumping off point to kind of swim in the waters of what we're talking about for the next hour with Shirin. We hope that you love this episode. Rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. When you give us 5 stars, take a screenshot of your review, send it to the text line below. You'll be entered to win our raffle. And this month we're giving away the energetic recalibration course, and it's really awesome. So enter thyself into the raffle.
Honestly, perfect time of year before you hang out with family and are tested to push your limits.
I rounded up to you and you people.
Prepare your nervous system. Yep, that's it. We'll get into the episode because Shirin is a genius when it comes to crypto. She's a witch and she explains it much better than we do. And we are not experts, but thanks for tuning in.
We're so excited to have Shirin back. Shirin, welcome.
Thanks. Excited to be here.
And you're the head witch in charge at Crypto Witch Club, right?
Yes.
So tell us how Crypto Witch got started, how you decided to, because, okay, a little context and backstory. I've been following you for a while. I feel like maybe around the time, a couple weeks or a couple months after you got started, and it's been amazing to see you grow. But I feel like you've had this Crypto Witch persona from the get-go, and it's been very built out. So how did that come about, and how did you kind of enter into creating that online persona of Crypto Witch Club?
Yeah, so I've been in cryptocurrency for 4 years personally. And when I first started out on my crypto journey, there really wasn't a resource that was positive and educational and just fun to read. Everything was really dark or angry, and it was just really loud on crypto Twitter. You kind of couldn't tell what content was, trustworthy and, what content you didn't get behind or what people's motives were. So my background is on digital marketing, and design. Me and my business partner lead a digital marketing agency based in New York, a very small one, but one nonetheless. And essentially, I kind of went to her and was like, hey, I really see a gap in the market. I love talking about cryptocurrency all the time. Everybody's sick of hearing about it. How do you feel about kind of taking our skills and taking what we do every day for our clients and applying it to a crypto content and a crypto channel? And she's super futuristic and was behind it. And we just started, talking about bright colors and celebs and kind of working out who we were. And, a big part of that was kind of just leading with a good vibe and kind of taking everything negative and toxic out of it and making it just feel really a comfortable place for anybody to come and connect or ask a question without being shamed. So that's kind of how I got started. But definitely the brand and the personality, because we do it on a day-to-day basis and we kind of got to do it for ourselves the first time, it definitely led to us having the ability to build it out and have it be a little bit like larger than life right from the get-go.
Yeah. One of the things when Michelle sent me your Instagram, it was just so refreshing to be like, oh yeah, it's so nice to not hear crypto bro speak and to hear it in a language that is just, so easy to understand. Your pop culture references are killer. And it's just like the language that we're already speaking. And so often I think people turn away from, different subjects because they think it's not for them, but really they're just maybe not having the information delivered to them in a package that they understand. So I think that's one of the really exciting things about what we're seeing right now in this space, and especially with your content, is that it's really just repackaging the content so that other people can digest it and not be turned off by it or think it's too complex for them.
And I think that holds true to a lot of financial education too, because
Totally.
I think people just overcomplicate it and they make it seem so much more difficult than it is. Like when you think of a trader or an investor, you think of stock images of like, white guys on a computer, and it's like, one of those huge 3-piece computers, and they're like day trading really fast and yelling. And it's just so the opposite. And I feel like that's the mindset we have to get everybody in. Like if we want to be an equitable space for all, we have to show everybody how, they can contribute to it and be a part of it and how it can help them. It's not just a financial bro movement. It's, there's so much capability there for so many different people.
100%. I actually feel like there's so much propaganda that is pro finance guy and anti sort of like equity around Bitcoin for this reason, like just because it hasn't been, I guess, messaged to us in the way that I think that you guys are doing it so well at Crypto Witch. I feel like you're like the Elle Woods of crypto,
Yeah. Oh my God. Thank you. That's huge. One of the best compliments we've ever gotten.
You can quote me on that.
Amazing. I'm going to put it on our website. Actually, we're building it out. I'm going to say the Elle Woods of crypto.
I think that's a pretty good tagline, actually.
That is really good.
I love it. I'm going to quote you.
Yeah. What brought you to the name? How did you guys land on that? Because I feel like it's just so powerful. And also, definitely on trend, in vogue. Like you see kind of these terms popping around a lot more, like haunted, witchy, like,
It's hot to be a witch,
It's cool to be a witch now. It's cool to be into astrology. And it's almost becoming mainstream, dare we say.
I think it's just like women reclaiming their power too. I feel like that's witchy, because that was like the ultimate diss back in like the Mayflower Day, right? They'd be like, she's a witch, and I think it's just kind of like turning that terminology and flipping on its head and making it a positive, It wasn't even always supposed to be Crypto Witch Club. I think like my personal Instagram's like Queen Shirin. And I think there was a minute it was going to be Crypto Queen. And then I was like, I was talked out of it. My friends were like, that's a little cheesy. And I was like, yeah, it might be. So we ended up, I loved I have my little coven in Brooklyn. We have little coven get-togethers, and we all hang out, and the coven kept coming up. So it almost was Crypto Coven. And then I remember wanting Crypto Witch, and it was taken. But club, like to be part of a club in crypto, it's such a term, you see in the industry, like in Discord. And, once I figured out club was the way to kind of like claim the name, because it was already taken. And that's how Crypto Witch Club kind of was formed. And it was totally the right identity. Like the minute, we did the logo and we had the name and we figured out what our, meaning was and why we were there, it was just really easy to run with. And people started asking us questions the first day, which is so cool. And I think, Michelle, you were like within the first weeks of us starting, we're only 2 months old, you were right in there. And I was like, who is this? Like, these girls are cool.
Oh, I'm glad you didn't think we were annoying.
No, I think from the beginning, from like the first question on day one, like we realized we had a community. And even though it was like 20 people, the fact that people were engaging and they were chatting with us and they were really interested, we were like, it might be 20 people, but it's the right 20 people. So we'll keep going with us.
Yeah. And I also think there's something really powerful that you are somewhat anonymous. Like, well, you're kind of unmasking yourself now, but when you do Q&As on Instagram and just kind of the way that the platform exists right now in its anonymity, it feels very safe to ask questions. Like you're not asking this sort of mega expert influencer who knows all, who knows everything and who's going to judge you for your incompetence or your ignorance. It feels so much more kind and gentle and safe. And I feel like I've turned so many people on and sent your profile with so many people who have asked me questions about crypto. And I'm like, just follow along and like ask questions because your questions will get answered, or at least an interesting dialogue will open up. Because I think that's the other thing around crypto, blockchain. There aren't always like hard and fast correct answers, right? It's a really quickly moving space in industry, and that can be overwhelming too.
Absolutely. Like even my business partner said, she was like, it's not like we're advertising or promoting something like a pair of jeans where everybody knows, what a pair of jeans is, but you still have to get that sale. Like imagine trying to reach a person and teach them what a pair of jeans is and then sell them from there. It's changing and ever evolving and it's growing every single day. And that makes it really intimidating. I learn something new every single day. And like, it's cool though. That's what makes the industry so exciting. It's one of the few places you can do that. We're not in Nassau, so.
Yeah. It feels like this universe that continues to grow exponentially and get like all the options and opportunities expand and expand and expand. And that's like, it's really incredible. But I think that a lot of people are still kind of stuck in the Bitcoin of like, I don't know, the dark web and thinking about it as this like thing that only, I don't know, drug dealers and people who don't want to be found are going to use as currency, where we know now there's just so much more that blockchain technology can offer us and provide as an amazing solution for like many of the problems that we see in the world in terms of inequity. But why would you say, Shirin, like decentralized finance or DeFi as they call it is like cool? Why are the people who like nerds like us who care about equity, why are we so stoked about it?
I think it kind of like puts the people back in power. I mean, our whole lives, our generations, like growing up, there was really only a centralized banking structure. And you could, pick where your products were from, like what bank you went to or who you took your mortgage out from. But I think for the first time, we're seeing self-custody and we're seeing how we can actually, through DeFi, earn a lot more on our investments, not just through investing in crypto and having those gains, but even being able to lend out your money without a bank through a liquidity pool, or to stake your crypto and hold it somewhere and get APYs of 8%, 9%, 10% plus. on it, I think it really just puts so much power. It's like, it's empowering, which sounds so cheesy. It can be so overused right now, but it's really the first time in history that, unless you keep your cash under, your mattress, which is, horrible for inflation purposes, you've never been able to have self-custody and to own your money. So it adds this new sense of empowerment and also competition. Like, what can banks offer you now if you can do those same services on your own without them and be in control and, really level out the playing field financially?
I heard a really good metaphor for the difference between like blockchain and DeFi and the fiat banking system, like our traditional banking system. I might mess it up. So it was that traditionally within the fiat system, you're to shake somebody's hand. So if the transaction is, I'm going to shake Michelle's hand, I would have to get Shirin, you to shake Michelle's hand for me. So there's the intermediary that, essentially you're harboring, maybe you've got some good hand sanitizer or hand lotion or whatever that's going to help the transaction for me, or I'm giving something to you so that you can shake her hand in a way that satisfies you. But ultimately there isn't a one-to-one connection there. Whereas with blockchain and DeFi, you're going directly to and from the source, if that makes sense.
Totally. And it's such a great metaphor to use because you can see in the simple introduction you just did how unnecessary that middle handshaker is. The hand sanitizer swoop in is, we can sanitize our own hands and shake them.
Yeah, totally. Just before we kind of go deeper, I am curious if you're up for doing like a little rapid fire glossary of terms for people who are just jumping into this for the first time.
Yeah, I'm comfortable. We'll see how good I do speaking under pressure.
I feel like you're going to be great. I'm not worried about you.
Let's do it.
Okay. Why don't we just start with blockchain technology?
Sure. So blockchain itself is essentially a ledger. It's a list of records called blocks, and they form a chain that uses cryptography to store data. So those blocks are now in a chain, and the data is recorded on each individual block, and it can't be modified or corrupted.
Great. Amazing. Yeah, I was trying to think of, okay, what's a metaphor we could give people also? I guess the handshaking thing. I'm trying
essentially what it allows for, and I think this is tricky with blockchain because you can give the technical definition, which is a little hazy, but I think that the best way to describe it, I guess, is just it's a peer-to-peer money transfer without having to use an intermediary. And blockchain is the technology that makes it difficult to impossible to forge or essentially to corrupt.
Right.
I always think, I mean, this is a super reductionist elementary view, which isn't completely correct, but I just think of blockchain as like a Google Doc where you can see who's edited it. You know, you can like view the history of the Google Doc or the Excel spreadsheet, and like that's pretty much it, right? Because you can see that transparently, and you also are not going to necessarily see a person's name on the blockchain, but you will see their, I don't know, like anonymous,
their wallet address.
Exactly. Their like quote unquote ID. That's a set of numbers and letters that identifies them throughout the blockchain and every single transaction that they do.
And I think it's important to point out there too, that's another common misconception is crypto is secret and private. It's used by dark actors. It's not necessarily private. It depends on the blockchain and it depends what you're using and it depends on the coin you're using as well.
Right. Okay. That's a great lead in. How can we define cryptocurrency as it relates to the blockchain and how they interact and use each other or... Yeah, that's not really the right way to say it.
I mean, no, it makes sense because cryptocurrencies essentially use blockchain to function, right? So coins often have their own blockchains and they can run on, and then some tokens use blockchains like Ethereum to build their protocols on. So essentially blockchain provides the building block to build financial systems on top of.
I think that we should define what Bitcoin is.
Oh, the OG player.
Yeah.
Totally. I mean, I think people often get Bitcoin and cryptocurrency and the different ones confused. And I think it's important to understand that Bitcoin, we like to call it the matriarch. Bitcoin was the OG, the first that came out, 2009. It was launched during the financial crisis. And essentially, it was the first ever cryptocurrency. So Bitcoin was the first cryptocurrency, but it falls under the cryptocurrency umbrellas. Any other project that is not Bitcoin is considered altcoin. But essentially, Bitcoin came out. There was this spooky, mysterious white paper by Satoshi Nakamoto, who some people believe is a group, some people believe is anonymous. There are so many hypotheses and conspiracies of who it is. But nevertheless, this person or group came out.
They're a witch of some kind.
Yes. I mean, nobody ever considers that. It's always like, they're always like.
It feels very gendered male, for sure.
Yeah.
You know.
But, you know, wouldn't it be so nice if it was like this little old lady that was like, I've discovered the secret to freeing the world, you know? And she did it.
I hope for that.
Right?
I hold that vision. Yes.
Totally. But it's interesting because when Bitcoin first came out, actually, my roommate was a developer, so he was very involved in that world. And, you know, I thought it was so sketchy, you know, 2011, 2012. Like, I didn't really know what to make of it. I didn't fully understand. And I don't know if many of us did how far reaching the tech was.
Yes, exactly. And just like how it could work. Like, we just didn't have examples. It's almost like breaking your brain, you know? It's as if we went in the Wayback Machine to like the Renaissance era and we showed someone an iPhone, they would just be like, you're a witch. We're going to burn you at the stake. Like, what is this thing? Right? Like, you can't even imagine what it can do because the technology is so advanced and so just like provides so many potential options. And I think at that point in time, I remember learning about Bitcoin and being like, well, this sounds like it's for drug dealers and bad people. Like, why is this something that we want? Like, it sounds like fake money, but it's so much beyond that.
I thought it was just something 4chan made, and I was like, I'm not into this.
Right. Like, that scared you enough. You were like,
right.
Yeah. Peace.
Yeah.
No, it was weird though. Yeah. And to me, I was like, well, I guess that could be valuable, but only in like that trade sense where you're like, you know, if you want to gamble on a football game, you're going to do it in Bitcoin instead of, you know, fiat currency. So it really wasn't until 2017, which is when I invested, or, you know, maybe 2016 was when I first started mentally coming around, where, you know, I saw kind of the ecosystem that had been built and what companies and brands were trying to do. And this is like even before, you know, DeFi. And I think there was like a click moment, but it was years in the making. You know, I think I talked to half a dozen people in depth about it before it clicked. You know, because it's hard to recognize new technology at the beginning. You have to get to the point where you see it implemented or you understand it can be implemented in such a way that it resonates with you. And then there's like no going back. Like, you drank the Kool-Aid, you're in it, you know, and I see it resonate with different people in different ways. You know, I met up with a friend I haven't seen in a couple of years the other day, and he's so into DAOs and like social based tokens. That's his whole life. He has a job in that now. And, you know, my husband is so into NFTs and art and like how, you know, to build a collection and how does that look when it's digital, and, you know, how does it differ from normal art collecting? You know, and other people are financially motivated. So it's so interesting to see the different ways people really dip into it, because it always pulls in people in kind of a different way, which is wild.
Yeah, one of the things that you were just saying, referring to, you know, what if it was this woman who's like, I found the key to the universe, like to free everyone kind of message. I feel like that's so much of what's happening right now with talk around like Web3 and DeFi and DAOs. What do you feel like is the promise in terms of making or having these alternative ways of creating more equity? How do you kind of see this really contributing to equity in a big way?
I mean, I feel like it's so early on. It's hard to say what I could expect it to do. I think what my hopes would be is just to give us more of a command of not only how we present ourselves, but how we're engaging with others. Because if you are on a centralized platform like Facebook or Instagram or, whatever you're on, you don't get to necessarily decide how to engage with other people on that platform or how they can engage with you or, how to carve out a name for yourself, essentially. And I think, and also, let's just be real, like, it gives you control of your data, So I think there's so much opportunity. I'm interested to see how people are going to kind of build out their own personal ecosystems on Web 3.0, because I think that's the next thing. I mean, you're not going to go on a centralized system to connect, but are you going to be connecting on Decentraland, in the metaverse, or are you going to be connecting in this decentralized web application where you have your own community and kind of like keys to that community? People kind of keys to your community and you kind of, change how you can engage.
I just joined my first DAO. And I'll reverse engineer. A DAO is a decentralized autonomous organization, so part of Web3. And one of the things that's so interesting to me about it is that it is basically self-sovereign, right? Like it's run by the community. People contribute to it. The community, we make our own rules and we can get paid for the work that we do and how we contribute to that space. And to me, this is one of the coolest things about what blockchain and everything that falls under blockchain, crypto, NFTs, smart contracts, DAOs, etc., what it can offer us is just new ways of creating a community and systems, just like you said. And I think for people who really care about equity, who really care about community, it can be challenging to get past the sort of like financial money grab that Bitcoin and cryptocurrency right now is really aligned with and is kind of messaged towards us. And I just want to hear a little bit more from you, Shirin. What are you seeing that's interesting and cool beyond like just trying to make money investing in crypto, which is sweet. Like we'll put a pin in that. I'm certainly not gonna like poo-poo that. But what are some cool projects that you're watching right now?
In terms of tokens and just what's being done with the technology?
I guess anything beyond kind of like just investing in Bitcoin, hoping to gain more financial affluence. So like anything NFT related or like DAO related or like with what you're seeing with smart contracts beyond how they're being used in NFTs. Is there a cool story or project that you're particularly interested in?
Well, I think in terms of the DAOs, what really intrigues me is I feel like it's kind of like remote working 2.0. The way you can kind of, collaborate and work with people where you never really had the chance to do that otherwise. I wonder how much of that was like spurred by COVID, and that remote pandemic. But in terms of like what I see with NFTs, I think the key thing for new investors to understand with NFTs it is a really saturated market. So it's not something some people go into with all, like you said, an investment mentality and a money-making mentality. But, I think if you really love art and you really love creators and you go into it with that intention, that can also pay off for you. And you can also have a collection you like. One of the ones we purchased recently, and I think, Michelle, you have one of these too, is NFT affirmation.
Yeah, I do.
I love it because for me, the moment I saw that project, my business partner and I and my husband were like, we're all getting this. Because it was I just love things that are nostalgic and like a sign of the times. And I got this like futuristic nostalgia meme vibes from it. And I also love it because, it has a lead woman, Kirsten Daly, who's one of the collaborators. So, love supporting female founders. And then Chad Knight, who's this fantastic digital artist. But I just had so much fun going through them and like laughing. And I was like, I think people should really consider when they're investing in things like art, whether it's NFTs or whether it's physical, making money is great, but like also like it's a lot less painful if you like it, it speaks to you and, it'll mean a lot more.
Yeah, I think we're just at the truly the tip of the iceberg for NFTs. And there's so much more that we could do with them. And I'm so curious to see like, what are going to be the first best sellers that are NFTs? Like, what books are going to become NFTs? Like, what else can we do beyond art and music, which I think is incredible, that also ends up really benefiting our creators, like you said, because of the way smart contracts are created. That technology is incredible and such a game changer in a creator economy, which is the economy that we're in right now, especially the digital creator economy. And right now we're making stuff for free and putting it on platforms like Instagram and TikTok. And guess what? Those platforms can't exist without us making content, but we're making it for free. And they're making money off of us making content. And
absolutely.
Smart contracts really open us up to be like, wait, I can make stuff on the internet. I can make money off of it. I can make a meme and it can go viral and I can like continue to reap the benefits of that and still share it on platforms that Mark Zuckerberg doesn't get paid to run, basically.
1,000%. Actually, now that you mention this, one of the, there's so many ways blockchain or smart contracts can help. A big thing is, I think, just voting. It could be you could access voting so easily. You wouldn't have to go to a polling location. It could really democratize the ability to vote for everybody, regardless of who they are. And I feel like that's key. That's such a major thing. Voter security and getting people to vote and showing them the capabilities. Like that's something that could be done in the future securely on the blockchain, which is something that I just thought was super exciting. We've had the same tech there for tens and tens of years, so it'd be an interesting thing to change up. But as
it's also not working.
It's not working.
It's
not working. So it's like, oh my God, can we actually use this technology and just streamline some systems? And, like you said, they've been broken. So let's just make it easier for kind of everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And give it some accessibility. And then going back to what you were saying with creators, as an advertiser, I'm always kind of looking for the next new thing and how our platform's going to run and how are things going to change. If you look at something like Brave browser and the basic attention token, Brave is a browser that essentially is ad-free, but you can choose to receive ads. If you receive the ads and engage with them, you actually get paid out in crypto. So you're actually rewarded by engaging with the ads. And similarly, I haven't seen many creators that are on this. I just saw Hacker Noon was on it though. You can, as the user, you can reward your content creators for the content they're putting out. So the way Brave ads work is instead of all the money going to the platform and then the platform distributing ads, the money goes 30% to the platform, Brave, and then 70% to the user who are then rewarded for those ads. So you have like this user creator economy where the platform is kind of just acting as like a kind of like a loose broker, if you will. But I thought it was interesting. Yeah, I thought it was so interesting. It's literally like a little dip your toe into Web3 because I love the idea of being like, I'm going to choose how I reward content creators and who I want to reward and whose content am I consuming. Well, that's where I'm going to send my rewards to, versus, content, creators having to rely on a platform.
It is so fascinating. And your brain starts to sort of like move from the next idea to the next to the next of, wow, really the most valuable thing that I have in this economy right now is my attention. Mm-hmm. And so when we think about, I think podcasting hasn't even reached its peak because we really haven't figured out how to monetize podcasting, but we have someone's attention for an hour. And that's a lot of time, and that's really valuable. And if you think about using something like Brave browser, or if inevitably a podcast platform gets set up where when you listen to a podcaster for a couple hours, your energy, your attention, because you're giving them attention, they get paid out for that, but that doesn't come from you. That is so valuable. Like it's just so cool to me. Like my brain, it's almost like my brain's on fire. I'm like, I just want to keep talking about this and jamming on it.
It's wild. I mean, I think it goes back to what you mentioned kind of early on, where it's like you have to kind of break your brain to and kind of relearn and kind of re-see what's possible, because I mean, you know how they always say we like use a very small % of our brain. I feel like we're cracking into the next level with Web 3.0.
Yes,
we're
it
getting
feels
there.
like that. Yeah, we're going from like smooth brain to wrinkly brain. You know, we're getting new wrinkles every time we learn more about like how Web3 works. And I feel, honestly, Shirin, sometimes I feel so stupid when I am researching myself, like, and learning about platforms, and I'm just like, wait, I don't even understand this. And I have to be really gentle with myself and say like, it's okay. It doesn't mean that you're dumb. This is a completely new way of thinking. And you have to almost decondition from what you've been told about what value is and how the world works and how money works and who's allowed to make money and for what. And that's really liberating and also really scary. And it can feel a little bit like, where do you even start? So for you, because you are very well researched, and I really appreciate about you. Where do you kind of look for your news and what you're following, and who are you learning from?
I think it's really a blend. So the number one thing I try to stay off of is kind of crypto Twitter, anywhere where there's noise, because I think in the crypto communities, there's just a lot of noise, and it's where I've seen people kind of go wrong when they're just starting to get in. They start following maybe somebody who isn't that experienced or somebody who's coming at crypto from a certain mindset. So I always first went to exchange blogs, so like Coinbase or Gemini or Binance. And while they can be a little bit, obviously self-serving, I could at least learn the facts there. And then, if you really believe in a project and you want to, see what's up, you need to go to the white pages of the project, which you can usually find on websites. There's another girl in crypto called She White Papers, and she actually has audios of white papers.
I just downloaded all of those.
I listened to one for the first time the other day when I was doing the dishes, and I was like, thank you. Like, this is the thing I never would have asked for, but like I needed. But, it's really interesting. It's essentially like thesis discovery, and you really get behind, the people. And then the people I do try to follow on things like Twitter and social platforms are the people behind projects. So I can get a good sense of how they are in terms of how they would lead, or, where they are in the space. So, VeChain's a huge one for me. So it's important for me to like follow that company, see what they're doing, see what their executives are doing, But in general, I always think a good place to start is if you start a major exchange, blogs. CoinMarketCap, I think, is great in terms of ranking and seeing, how big a market cap is, how much circulating supply is out there, different coins. It ranks everything. So you can kind of, see where it is in comparison to other coins. And I think that's a good way for new people to discover what's popular, like why it's popular, and kind of get, a good sense of what actual projects are out there.
Yeah, I think you also kind of begin to, it is really overwhelming, I would say, to get started learning, but you begin to find people who are aligned with you, with this, I would say, happens across the board with investing, right? There are going to be, whether we're talking about like stocks or we're talking about VC or angel investing, there are going to be some major players who have really strong opinions, who are legit, right? But you may disagree with them. You may disagree with their investment philosophy, and that's okay. And so you kind of just have to find your people, and that means that you might kiss a lot of frogs because there are a lot of frogs in crypto, I would say right now, a lot of frog bros.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think the people I think that's totally, spot on, like find your tribe, but I think a lot of the people who tend to be the loudest are also the people who are usually the greenest. So it's 100 times better to follow like, a credible, well-respected advisor, like financial or crypto advisor that you disagree with, than it is to follow a million people who agree with you and, are just putting out kind of like unrefuted claims.
Yeah. Yeah. I think this is one of those, I think you learn best when you have dissenting opinions.
Mm-hmm.
When you can kind of hear both sides and and hear really intelligent people give their hot take, right? Or their perspective, and then kind of discern for yourself, well, which one feels more correct for me right now? And I also think, and Shirin, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like you think this too. You kind of just have to get started, right? You just kind of have to get started investing and see what happens.
And
Absolutely.
I think pick a lane, because I kind of feel like where it's at right now with all of this, with if you're just kind of putting everything under the umbrella of Web3, it's almost as if back in the 90s, you were like, I just want to learn about the internet. And you're like, okay, what part of the internet? Like, there's so many different directions you can go. So I think finding like what lights you up the most, is it NFTs? Is it crypto? And then kind of like narrowing in on that. That's how I'm thinking about it.
Is it community based? Like, do you want the social token so you guys can put a treasury together and do dinners together? Like it can, I believe it will really change every, kind of different component of our life. So yeah, start with what interests you the most, what you feel the most passionate about. But in terms of on the investing side, I think, that's the biggest question. People every single day are like, how do we get started? And we're like, check out this getting started guide, which is, it's so simple. It's 5 slides. We have it for you, but it's just taking that first step, because we can't, make them push go. But what I found, and whenever I've had friends who are hesitant or people in my orbit, I'm usually like, let's just put $20 in. Like, let's open up an exchange. What interests you? Okay, well, why don't you put $20 in and just kind of follow it and kind of learn a little bit about that company? And then normally what happens is they start paying attention to the app and then the news in the app and, kind of where that token's going. And then they'll get something that's like, there's a new token, and they'll learn about that. So it's just, nobody's going to be able to learn everything overnight. Sometimes people ask me questions and are so specific, I have to Google, the coin they're talking about. I'm like, what? But it's about being able to understand how it works together as an ecosystem. And, that's really, I think, the most important part. But you're only going to get there if you start with one step.
Yeah, it's, I'm trying to say what I want to say as quickly as possible, and I'm taking longer than I want, but I think that you kind of just have to be brave and start with a little baby step, and also just see what lights you up and gets you excited. And, and it's okay if you change your mind. It's okay if you're like, what, actually, I'm not that interested in XYZ thing, or I'm not that really interested in trading. I just want to hold. So great. Start with some really stable coins, and then if you feel lit up again, then maybe go play a little bit more.
Totally. You do, do what makes you feel good. And it's, it's your approach. It's what makes you happy. That's what you should focus on and see how blockchain can maybe, change that part of your life.
Yeah. Yeah. And one last thing that I want to talk about briefly, we just put up a story on Instagram, and we got so many comments, and I think that it's a really good topic to address, but lots of questions from intuitive and curious witches around the environment and the impact of blockchain and crypto on the environment. I have a big perspective on this, but Shirin, I want to hear from you first. What do you kind of say to people when they ask you that question about the environmental impact, and if it's actually ethical to invest in cryptocurrency?
I think it's important to be really transparent, because there are blockchains and there are certain cryptocurrencies that do not benefit the environment. I think, Bitcoin, you can see everybody knows about that energy consumption associated with mining Bitcoin. But my take on it is it's such a young technology, and there are so many kinks to work out and so much that's already being done. You can see a lot of tokens move from proof of work, which is, to not get into deep, but that's what Bitcoin is and Ethereum is now at the moment. But they're actually proof of stake, which requires a significant less amount of energy. Similarly, you can see tokens converting. So yes, Ethereum's proof of work right now, which is more energy intensive, but that's converting to proof of stake to limit that. The amazing thing about cryptocurrencies that is not true of every industry, is crypto can be mined using green energy.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's really important that we as a community work towards ways of using green energy and working with more proof of stake type tokens to kind of work towards this and kind of create, more of a carbon neutrality around it. Also, I mean, it should be said that Bitcoin, it doesn't require an intense amount of energy to transfer it peer to peer. What requires the intense amount of energy is the actual mining process, which, there's a finite number of Bitcoin. In the near future, they'll all be mined. But again, that's just one problem. There's a lot of layers to this. And I think the community is they're moving, in a good positive direction. But yeah, when you look at those, kind of dinosaur coins like Bitcoin, it's kind of like the AOL dial-up, of crypto. Yeah. It's the OG, and there's a lot that needs to be optimized. And, I'm confident it'll get there, but it's definitely something that needs to be addressed. And, I think the community is working towards.
Yeah. And I mean, the infrastructure as it gets built, I think in this space will continue to lower the sort of imprint and the energy. It will reduce energy costs of Bitcoin, blockchain, everything that we've talked about today. And like you said, there are a ton of coins that really support, are very green. I was just talking to a friend about, she's like a blockchain expert. She's so smart, about this coin that's being basically mined using the ocean waves. And so they put these little sensors in the ocean that actually are already being used for other scientific research. But as the waves sort of move the sensors, it gives energy to get crypto, which I think is so fucking cool.
That's amazing. And, a lot of industries can't make use of green energy like that or solar energy. And I think that blockchain just really aligns, and crypto really aligns to really put that energy, center stage, because we can use that. And that's so exciting to hear, the waves can mine crypto.
Right.
Like, how amazing.
It also, when we talk about the very most basic version of crypto, what we were saying about the handshake, right? We're taking away the bank who's the middleman, and so many banks support fossil fuel companies and are sort of kissing cousins with the worst betrayers of the environment. And so if you're invested, if you have money at Chase Bank, you are also supporting the destruction of the environment, because those banks are supporting those businesses, those giant corporations. So, I mean, not a good,
100%.
not a good argument, but yes, it's not a good look. And it's another reason I think to consider cryptocurrency and blockchain more carefully. Yes, it absolutely could be done better. And look at all of these use cases that prove that it is going to be done better. It just needs to be done better at scale. And I think that dismissing it out of hand without really looking deeper and questioning, all right, how bad is this for the environment? Is it really? Is this actually a better solution? Just dismissing it feels short-sighted to me.
I think short-sighted is a good word for it, but I think it's fair. I think it's good to criticize it, and it's good to highlight, the things that aren't working, but it's definitely, in my opinion, short-sighted to only focus on that and say, well, that's not good for the environment. That doesn't work, because It doesn't have to be bad for the environment.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's great to ask these questions and to question we should. And transparency is, to me, one of the coolest things about this space. I feel like there is so much transparency and the opportunity to ask questions because it's a new industry. So we're supposed to, we're not supposed to just walk in and feel like we should know everything. We should ask questions. We should question what practices are, and we should demand for them to be better and create those changes. And I feel like I see that happen so quickly in this space. And that's why it excites me personally so much.
Completely. And I feel like if you love this space, it's important to have that, to hear that feedback, have that info, and be involved in that conversation, because this is our earth. We only have one. I don't think blockchain technology is going anywhere. So let's see how we can use it to the best of our ability in a way that's good for us.
Mm-hmm. Amen. So Shirin, we're coming up at the very end. I don't want to take up too much more of your time because I think we almost already took you over. But if someone was going to just get started, beyond following Crypto Witch Club on Instagram, what would you say are the first maybe 3 steps that a listener should take to get started in the world of blockchain and crypto?
Number 1, just download an exchange on your phone. If you're interested in DeFi, you can try Zapper.fi. That is a great dashboard where you can invest in all different DeFi platforms like SushiSwap and Uniswap. If you're more of a beginner, grab Coinbase or Gemini. 2, pick your projects based off what that exchange has. I always love to have Bitcoin or Ethereum. I'm personally more a fan of Ethereum, but that's a personal choice. Go through the altcoins you find interesting. And then 3, just start with a small amount, whether that's to you $20 or $100 or $1,000. Just put something in so you're in the ecosystem and you can kind of watch it and grow. Just do it.
Yeah, just do it. Amen. I love that. And follow Crypto Witch Club, because if you're an anxious person and you just want more info, you will get so confident following what Shirin and her team are doing and building there, because they give the best advice. And I really appreciate your perspective and how fair and balanced you are. You always give people what feels like is the whole story of, listen, here's the good, here's the bad. And then you give your perspective as someone who's been doing this for a while. And I'm guessing, just like any investor, you've probably made some mistakes and you've also had some big wins. And to hear from you why you make your decisions and your choices is really powerful, because it's kind of like using a mental model or a framework that we as maybe newer investors can begin to use as well. So I just want to encourage you to I love when you share your thought process. It helps me become an even more discerning investor.
Amazing. I love hearing that. And you know what? I think it's good because it's important to know the facts, but you have to trust yourself. And, I think everybody's personally different and their investment styles are different. So, follow your gut.
Amen. Shirin, how can people support you and Crypto Witch Club?
So we have a newsletter that's starting at the end of this month. You can go to our website, cryptowitchclub.com, and sign up for it. And that's going to be monthly crypto news and tidbits and kind of all the things we couldn't fit on the Instagram.
Amazing. Oh, I can't wait. I'm going to follow. I think I'm actually probably already on the email list, because as soon as you put it up, I'm pretty sure I added myself, but I'm just going to double check and make sure that I'm on there. This is wonderful. We love you so much. Thanks for re-recording with us. And I think that's it.
Thank you so much. Awesome.